Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. New Orleans facing fear in the wake of a New Year's Day violent attack that killed 15. Native son Walter Isaacson on the city's ability to bounce back.
The word resilience is not necessarily the first adjective you want to have in life, but it's not the last adjective either.
And the awareness we should all have of a dangerous world.
We can't quit going to Times Square. We can't quit going to the Antoines for New Year's Eve.
It's not just the Big Ten anymore. The expanded and increasingly professionalized college football playoff season. Abe Madkour of the Sports Business Journal on the money on and off the field.
I think they'll make some tweaks going forward, but all in all, a very good inaugural season.
Plus, President Biden with a last-minute block of the sale of U.S. Steel to Japan's Nippon. Alcohol is linked to cancer, officially. And a federal court has struck down net neutrality rules designed to level the digital content playing field.
I wonder what the impact will be for a Netflix or someone who has been able to have so much usage.
It's Friday, finally, January 3rd, 2025. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen. Andrew is off today. Overnight, stocks in China fell in a pretty volatile session. The Financial Times reporting that China's central bank is planning a policy overhaul that would bring it closer in line to the U.S. Federal Reserve and the ECB. In comments to the Financial Times, the central bank said that it would prioritize the role of rate adjustments and move away from quantitative objectives for loan growth. In addition to setting interest rates, the PBOC has also given guidance to banks on how much they should expand their loan books. Now it tells the FT that policymakers fear those growth targets lead to indiscriminate lending without consideration for risk. A move away from those targets represents a shift to more orthodox monetary policy. The PBOC also told the FT that it plans to cut interest rates, in their words, at an appropriate time this year. China's bond yields hit record lows overnight. There's all sorts of moves we've seen in the currency markets as a result, and this is going to take some time for people to kind of adjust to.
Yeah, I don't know how this works itself out. They got, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Yeah,
and it always is with monetary policy.
There were levels that they were kind of defending last year in the yuan, and they've kind of given up on those, and that's going to lead to some turmoil.
Everything's overbuilt, and that's why they're constantly. And speaking of dumping, this isn't exactly the same thing, but a lot of steel has been dumped over the years. Multiple reports say President Biden has decided to block Nippon Steel's takeover bid for U.S. Steel. The decision is expected to be announced as soon as today. President Biden had 15 days to approve or block the deal after the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. failed to reach a consensus and referred the matter to him back on December 23rd. Biden and President-elect Trump have both spoken in opposition to that deal.
Although it was strange to see U.S. Steel shares down by almost 9% on this news. Were you surprised that this happened, given how much they had talked about this beforehand?
Is 9% a lot based on the price?
Probably not. Right? Yeah. Probably not. It's just, I guess it would have been news to me.
It is, and it's down again this morning. So.
Yeah, it would have been news to me if they didn't block the deal, if he didn't block the deal.
I don't know. Is it definitely done? I don't know. We'll see what happens on January 20th.
This is some pretty big news, too. A federal court has effectively struck down net neutrality rules. The court ruled yesterday that the Federal Communications Commission lacked the authority to oversee wireless and home broadband services under the same set of rules that govern utilities. Those rules that were enacted in the Obama administration prevented broadband providers from playing favorites with the websites that they carry. Republican FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr, who is set to chair the FCC after Trump's inauguration, praised this decision, but it could lead to some pretty significant changes. I wonder what the impact will be for a Netflix or someone who has been able to have so much usage and so much video that's carried essentially for free at the same rate.
When each administration has different FCC, it's really hard to plan.
That's been business's big complaint.
If you're investing a lot, you ought to be able to, I don't know if you should throttle, but you ought to be able to.
You should be able to make some money, or you ought to be able to look, if Netflix built its entire company on the idea that it gets free run of these information superhighways, that's been a very controversial thing, too. They wanted it originally so that small players would be able to create businesses and run with it. But now you've got massive businesses that are sitting on this.
Something yesterday that said this is the final stake in the heart of net neutrality. I don't know. I should have read it. Didn't know. I'm going to have to know about it today. The U.S. Surgeon General this morning issuing a new advisory on the, in their words, the direct link between alcohol consumption and increased cancer risk. A release from the Department of Health and Human Services puts alcohol consumption as the third leading preventable cause of cancer in the U.S., following tobacco and obesity. It says alcohol heightens the risk of 7 types of cancer, including throat cancer, liver cancer, and breast cancer in women. And it says while scientific evidence for the connection has been growing over the past few decades, fewer than half of Americans recognize it as a cancer risk factor. The advisory includes recommendations to raise awareness of the link, including updating health warning labels on alcoholic beverages, and prominent beverage makers are falling on this news.
I remember when smoking was targeted by the American Cancer Society. When I was a kid in school, I used to give out stickers like, "Kiss me, I don't smoke," all kinds of things that went through that. And younger people stopped smoking. And now you're seeing younger people that aren't drinking to the same levels as they're older.
A lot of people don't drink.
Yeah, a lot of people
Kids.
don't. Yeah.
And nobody smokes. I mean, when I see people
smokes.
smoke, I'm
Yeah.
like...
Although they do smoke pot, which is a little weird.
I smell a lot of that, yeah.
Yeah.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, fear and resilience in the Big Easy. Biographer and professor at Tulane in New Orleans, Walter Isaacson, weighs in on the New Year's Day attack in his home city.
We see periods of uprising, whether it be, 1848 or 1968 or in the 1890s with anarchists. At a certain point, the fever breaks, which I hope will happen both in the United States and around the world.
This is Squawk Pod. Here's Becky Quick.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Squawk Box. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. Bourbon Street reopening in New Orleans last night with a heavy police presence. The city was left reeling after a New Year's Day truck attack that killed 14 people. Authorities say that the driver of the truck, Army veteran Shamsuddin Jabbar, was inspired by the Islamic State militant group. He was fatally shot by police after ramming into partygoers. The FBI says that it is confident that Jabbar was not aided by anyone else in that attack. Joining us now to offer some perspective on the resiliency of New Orleans is CNBC contributor and New Orleans resident Walter Isaacson. He's a professor at Tulane University and an advisory partner at Perella Weinberg. He's also the author of Elon Musk. Walter, first of all, I'm so very sorry for what's happened in your city. We're all sitting back, shocked by all of this that has happened. And I know you were
you look at the list of people killed. You read their stories. I mean, this happens all over, and it is really horrific.
Yeah. Things are reopening today, and I just wonder what the mood in the city is at this point.
Well, the Sugar Bowl was played yesterday. Everything was reopened, as you said in the intro. The word resilience is not necessarily the first adjective you want to have in life, but it's not the last adjective either. New Orleans is a resilient city. I spent New Year's Eve, as I have for the past 30 years, with about 25 friends at Antoine's restaurant right off of Bourbon Street, near where it happened. And the French Quarter was very, very well protected. But these things can happen. And I will say this: I'm going to be at Antoine's next year with the same set of friends. I mean, we're not going to let this shut us down.
As you haven't with disasters that have struck in the past. With
20 years ago
Katrina.
we had Katrina, and that's when we really did have to rally together as a city. This is something slightly different. This is a national, international type things. These terrorist events or people who just snap and are crazy, they just happen. And, unfortunately, we in America think there must be a solution to every problem. But these things are so different and so random, just whether it's a guy shooting the head of the United Health Club or a Nashville shooting or the Oklahoma bombing, people snap. And it's just, the risks we now have in this world.
It coming in quick succession with the follow-up attack in Las Vegas had a lot of people wondering about national security questions and what we could be facing in 2025. You point out that this is something that we have seen time and time again, but there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, a lot of questions internationally, a lot of questions about safety and security, wars that are taking place. You've got the perspective of somebody who's looked at this from a long time. How are you feeling about things right now, Walter?
Well, you can look at it historically. You always have had waves starting in the 1890s with the anarchist violence, whether it be in Europe or the United States, and obviously in the 60s you have it. Now you just have these random politicized, sometimes ideological things, but I think we make a mistake when something happens, whether it's the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, and everybody's waiting to see which ideology did the person have. And likewise with the bomber on the truck driver on Bourbon Street, everybody's waiting to see what was that flag, because they had the flag covered. Was it a Palestinian flag, a ISIS flag, a Trump flag, whatever it may have been? I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I mean, these are people who just go absolutely horrifically nuts, and we just have to find ways to protect ourselves.
That's the one one area of criticism that New Orleans has received. That was for the city having up those barriers, those steel barriers that have been there.
Right, Becky, I can't believe that. I was there walking through. There were barriers and barriers, and right at the foot of Canal Street, there had been 2 bollards, but the guy went up on the sidewalk. There was a big police cruiser blocking the street. I mean, if the bollards had been up, it wouldn't have helped anything, because the guy, you just can't sometimes prevent if somebody's going to drive up on a sidewalk and around. So there was a big old police cruiser there, and the police acted, instantly. Very good. They were all there. But if somebody's going to drive a truck somewhere, unless you're going to put chain link fences, bollards, and big iron bars on everything, people are going to find a way to get up on sidewalks. This is, we can't guard against everything.
No, you're right. There have been some questions raised about technology in the world making it even tougher to protect ourselves at times, whether that's autonomous driving vehicles, whether that's drones in the skies. Should we feel safer
I do worry
about this?
Drones, by the way. Drones are the ones that could be the real problem anywhere and everywhere. Yeah, and look, I just mentioned the 1890s. I said this is when Alfred Nobel invents dynamite, the same time that anarchists are coming in. We always have new technology. We've got technologies that protect us, whether it's, Palantir and video cameras, and we have technology that both radicalizes us, allows some nutcase to start reading up about ISIS and getting involved in some, ideology, or being able to use different types of vehicles. But all of these are pretty low tech so far. There are people with automatic rifles shooting things up, or pickup trucks, with explosives in them. So I just don't think there's an easy solution here.
I'm glad that you brought the historical perspective with you, because I wonder what's happened in the past to calm things down, whether it be the 1890s, whether that be the 1960s. What happens on a broader level that brings calm after those periods of uprising and turmoil?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we see periods of uprising, whether it be 1848 or 1968 or in the 1890s with anarchists. And there are many causes of it, but at a certain point, the fever breaks, which I hope will happen both in the United States and around the world. And the fever breaks, and you have a calmer period. But Becky, I hate to say it, even in a nice, calmer, less politically polarized period, you're still going to have people like the Oklahoma City bomber, which was not in a particularly polarized thing, who just go nuts and do really bad things.
But Walter, Munich, when was Munich? How many times do you need to see this movie? I mean, radical,
and you had it with
radical
the
Islam,
Christmas.
but radical Islam extremism, it wasn't a Trump flag; it was an ISIS flag, and no one ever thought it was a Trump flag. And if you've got college campuses after October 7th flooded with students just saying the most horrific things, and then you've got people laughing and applauding when someone gets shot in the back, a father with a wife and 2 kids because it's, of whatever reason, what the United Healthcare. I mean, I don't know whether it's social media, but these people need to get it together. I don't see how this comes back. I don't see how this comes back.
And you're right. ISIS is just has a horrible, violent ideology. But as you say, the United Healthcare shooter. I mean, you can search all over social media and everything he does. It wasn't simply because politics was polarized. Sometimes people just snap.
Well, we definitely don't want terrorists able to come across the southern border and we don't know where they are. We definitely don't want
Absolutely
that.
not.
And in this case, that wasn't what happened. But do you feel totally safe that right now we know who everyone is in this country that came across the border in terms of, I mean, what do we hear? That there's 100 people on the terrorist watch list that we don't even know where they are.
No, you're right about that. And Becky was right when she asked the question of how did these things happen? And one of the things that's happened in the past 10, 15, 20 years is a wave of, whether it be in Europe or Germany or United States, a wave of both immigrants, asylum seekers, and sometimes once you get above 15, 20%, whether it's in the 1840s or today, of people who come across and are not yet part of our society, that can cause great polarization. And as you said, if you don't have safe borders, you're going to have a lot of problems, even though that wasn't the case either in the Las Vegas Cybertruck attack or the Bourbon Street attack.
No, just in, lighting the person on fire on the subway and watching it and fanning the flames and, chortling. That was definitely from...
Yeah, but you know what, Joe? I mean, as you know, I'm in New York quite often. I'm on set with you quite often. I take the subway in New York still. We're all going to be resilient. We can say these things, we can all say how horrible these things are. But we got to, like New Orleans does, go on with our lives. I'm not going to quit taking the subway in New York. The traffic in Midtown's horrible.
It could be safer. We can't just
It could be
throw
safer.
up our hands,
Yeah, and by the way, alcohol. There are many things that could be safer in this world, and we don't throw up our hands. We work very hard to make things more safe. On the other hand, we don't quit going to Times Square to go on your show, and we don't quit taking the subway, and we don't quit going to Antoine's on New Year's Eve, because that's what we are.
Tenure. I said tenure. I'm joking around with Walter. I don't know who what goes on these college campuses, Walter. Seriously, the guy that said something. He's now teaching a course at Columbia. You see that yesterday? Same guy that was celebrating October 7th is now teaching some course again. Tenure, Walter. Join me on the right a little bit. Come, just move a little bit this way. Can you do that? For the way things used to be?
Happening on college campuses, especially in the Northeast, has been very radicalizing. And, on tenure, I haven't thought it through too much, but tenure's probably not the world's greatest system. It's been around 400 years, but it's... that's why people...
When you hire in the first place and they're communists and socialists, probably not... And then they get tenure.
Joe, I want you to come down. I want you to help teach my class at Tulane.
Tulane's a little different.
Really good students, and that this country is going to be fine with the next generation, even if all your complaints have some validity.
Kids are going to Liberty University, I don't know. No, my daughter went to Penn.
UPenn.
Cesspool.
Walter,
of that type of
thing. I'm not here to defend the Ivy League schools, although they do a lot for this country too.
Walter, I want to thank you for being with us and for your message, your perspective, the view of history.
We all got to go on. We got to live with some risk here, and we got to realize how horrific these things are. but we can't quit going to Times Square. We can't quit going to the Antoine's for New Year's Eve. And we're going to be a resilient city here because there are people who care passionately about this city and love it, and it'll be fine.
And it is a great city. Walter, thank you very much.
Next on Squawk Pod, college football's inaugural 12-team season might have been a financial success, but what's the toll it takes on student athletes? Sports journalist Abe Madkour.
We're seeing these athletes get millions of dollars in name, image, and likeness payments. We're seeing more and more put on their plate in terms of on-field obligations. So I think the academic amateurism angle is something that is a very good question.
The big money of sports biz, right after this. You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC, today with Joe Kernen and Becky Quick.
Stand by, Joe. His mic, cue.
The Sugar Bowl between Georgia and Notre Dame kicked off after being delayed a day following the terror attack in New Orleans. The Fighting Irish beat the Bulldogs 23-10 to advance in the college football playoff. They will now play Penn State in the Orange Bowl on January 9th. The bowl season is just part of the revenue surge into college sports. Joining us now, Abe Madkour, Sports Business Journal executive editor. Is this a success that some of the games were really bad, Abe, blowouts?
They were, Joe, but Happy New Year. Good to see you. All in all, this 12-team inaugural playoff has to be considered a success. They've got 4 marquee teams in the semifinals. They've had great early rounds in terms of being on campus, even though the games weren't as competitive as CFP leaders would like. I think they'll make some tweaks going forward, Joe, but all in all, a very good inaugural season.
There won't be a Florida State, at least, right? I mean, would you rather have it this way, where someone that maybe deserved a shot, then you find out for sure when the rubber meets the road? It's better than having that question, for fans and students and everyone else.
Well, somebody's not going to be happy at the end of the day, Joe. And I think that's what the committee will go back and look at in terms of the seeding of these teams, who gets in of the 12. But this was a big gamble to extend the season, have a much more formal playoff, more access, 12 teams instead of the previous just 4 teams. I think that's been a success. I really think it's heightened interest in the regular season. And I do think that they'll make some changes, but there have been some cons. Like I said, the seeding hasn't been perfect. The games haven't been as competitive as I'm sure leaders would like. I think that having the transfer portal open during the playoffs is definitely not something that they want. And I think that the conference championships in December may be less meaningful than they were in the past. So they still have some things to work out, but I'm sure they're happy with these Final 4.
Abe, is this just, I wonder where we're going to be in 5 years, because we always thought of these as student athletes. Is the student part of that missing in 5 years when you extend the season like this, when you have so many things that are going on? How can you possibly still be a student and be doing this?
Becky, it's a great question. We're seeing the more and more professionalization of college sports. We're seeing these athletes get millions of dollars in name, image, and likeness payments. We're seeing more and more put on their plate in terms of on-field obligations. So I think the academic amateurism angle is something that is a very good question, and people ask it all the time. I was at a conference recently that Sports Business Journal held, and it was more about this has become a more professionalized environment and will continue to be so.
So there's a leadership vacuum for how to handle it, you point out. Whose domain is it? Whose should it be?
Well, there's been a lot of calls, Joe, as you know, for now a commissioner of college football. This event, of course, is run by the College Football Playoff Committee. That's made up of the big conferences and Notre Dame and some others. But NCAA doesn't rule this tournament or doesn't oversee this tournament. So there's definitely a leadership void. And that's something that I think people are calling on, not just about structure and setup, but there has to be some more guardrails around name, image, and likeness. You're going to see more and more interest of private equity potentially getting involved in college football specifically, Joe. So a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of decisions, difficult decisions to be made by the leaders in this space.
So Nick Saban, you think he'd do it after being totally overexposed by Aflac and Verbo? Does he want to come back and do something like that? Not as much money.
It would be a step down maybe for Nick, but I think everyone's looking at Nick, Joe, as someone who understands the space more than anybody. Does he want to do it? I have no idea. I don't know his inclination to be interested in such a position, but college football coaches are under real challenges these days. And so they look at Nick Saban as someone who has seen every challenge in the book and could potentially find a way forward. But it's to be determined if the other leaders in college sports want an overlord or a commissioner.
A lot of stuff always happens, doesn't it? I don't know what they didn't cover the national anthem or something. I see things on social media. And did you, what that was targeting, wasn't it? Did they want Texas? Did they want Texas to be in the game and not? I mean, how did that happen?
I love your questions because you're always so unpredictable, Joe. I don't know what's going to come out. I do not know if that was targeting. I know a lot of ASU fans feel that they didn't get a fair shake in that game, but I'm not going to claim that they wanted Texas in the semifinals.
There was another question I saw on social media. I don't even know if this is true, but there was a guy on TikTok who put out this whole thing about some obscure rules when it comes to Arizona State versus that. He said that the attempt for the field goal where it hit the ground first and then bounced in, that should have been a live ball, that they called it wrong, and that there would have never been any overtime at all had they called it correctly.
Yeah, great thing about covering sports business is I just have to focus on the business side of sports, not the on-field product. But there were some good games and some fun things.
Yeah, here's the deal, though. I guess anybody who complained about this would go through this entire college system that's set up right now, go to that committee instead. I think it goes back to your point that there needs to be somebody, some overlord in charge of deciding all of this and maybe bringing some order to things.
As soon as Rutgers football gets in there, Becky, you'll be excited, right?
Very good.
I want December, January madness. I want 64 teams. In
well, it will expand. Joe's onto something. It will expand from 12. I don't think up to 64, but it's going to grow, no doubt about it.
Not playing games.
Oh my gosh.
That's the only way it's going to happen for Rutgers, I think. Probably.
Yeah.
Can't bet on Rutgers anyway. In New Jersey, can't bet on.
No, you can't. I'm okay with that.
You are. All right, Abe. Thanks.
Great seeing you. Happy New Year, both.
And that is the pod for today and for the week. Thanks for listening, and thanks for starting off 2025 right here. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern and get the smartest takes and analysis from our TV show directly into your ears when you follow this podcast, Squawk Pod. We'll meet you right back here on Monday. Have a great weekend.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.